I don't want his fat mom stealing attention on my day. That sentence didn't just hurt. It split something open inside me that I'd spent 58 years tentando remender com silencio. Dietas falas y sorrisos educados. My name is Linda Mae Carter. I'm 58 years old, and on a cold Thursday morning in February, I found out my own daughter-in-law banned me from my first grandchild's baby shower because of my body. I live in Columbus, Ohio, in a small 2-bedroom house on a quiet street not far from the elementary school where I worked for 30 years as a teacher's aide. The kind of neighborhood where you still see kids riding bikes until the streetlights flicker on and old men shovel their driveways in slow, careful lines. My life has always been small in the eyes of the world. Normal, predictable, safe. But inside my head, it never felt that calm. Most mornings start the same way. I wake up around 6:30 a.m., before the sun, when the house is still blue and quiet. I sit on the edge of my bed for a second, feeling the way the mattress dips under my weight. It's a familiar ache, that quick sting of shame that comes before I even stand up, like gravity is reminding me how much space I take up before the day even begins. In the kitchen, I make my coffee the way I've made it since Daniel was a little boy. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. I always tell myself I'll switch to black coffee next Monday. Next Monday never comes. I stand at the window, mug warming my hands, watching the street while the news murmurs in the background. Weather, traffic, politics, all blending into a kind of white noise. My phone usually buzzes around 7:15 a.m., with some kind of notification. News. Store coupons. The occasional text from a former coworker asking if I want a sub at the school. Since I retired last year, my days have gotten quieter. Too quiet sometimes. That's why I hold on to every call, every text from my son like it's a lifeline. That morning, February 9th, the buzz came at 7:12 a.m. I remember the time because I glanced at the microwave clock as I reached for my phone on the counter. 7:12 red digits, my reflection faint in the shiny door. My heart did that tiny hopeful leap it always does when I see Daniel's name. But it wasn't from him. It was from Emily. Emily with the perfect photos, the perfect hair, the perfect little bump showcased in choreographed Instagram posts. Emily, who always smelled like expensive perfume and spoke like she was being recorded for a podcast. Emily, who called me Linda instead of Mom, and made it sound like a polite downgrade. The preview of the message showed just one line. I don't want his fat MOM stealing attention on MY Day. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. My brain tried to protect me, I think. Maybe it's not about me. Maybe it's a quote from something. Maybe. Then I opened it. The whole message was sitting there in gray and white bubbles like a slap in slow motion. I don't want his fat MOM stealing attention on MY Day. Tell her we're keeping it small and just doing something with a few friends. I'm not dealing with her crying or making it about her feelings again. I want nice aesthetic photos. Not some big woman in the background looking miserable. My first thought was that she must have sent it to the wrong person. My second thought was that I suddenly couldn't feel my feet. I reread the message 3 times. My heart was pounding loudly enough that I could hear it in my ears, drowning out the TV. My coffee shook in my hand. Fat mom. Not some big woman in the background. My day. My day. Not our. Not family. Not baby. Hers. The room felt smaller. The air thicker. I put the mug down because I was afraid I'd drop it. I braced my hand on the counter to steady myself, the laminate cool under my palm. I could see my reflection in the microwave again. Round face, thinning hair pulled back, soft body wrapped in an old gray t-shirt with Columbus Elementary staff, peeling off the front. This is what she saw when she looked at me, I thought. A problem standing in the corner of her curated life. A flaw in her aesthetic. The message bubble popped again. Sorry, that was meant for Daniel. My throat closed. There are moments in life when you can feel the ground shift, even if nothing around you technically moves. This was one of those moments. It was like a curtain had been pulled back and I was seeing, really seeing, the role I'd been assigned in my own family. An inconvenience. A potential embarrassment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know what to say. I could feel old voices rising in my head like ghosts. You'd be so pretty if you lost some weight. Do you really need a second helping, Linda? We're just worried about your health, that's all. My mother's tight lips. My aunt's disappointed eyes. The way people at church would squeeze my arm and laugh. You're solid, aren't you? Like that was a compliment. I had spent a lifetime trying to be smaller. Not just physically. Softer voice. Smaller opinions. Always scooting my chair in, apologizing when my arm brushed someone's, making sure I never took the last slice of cake. Making space for everyone else. And still it wasn't enough. My fingers finally typed something. Did you really mean that, Emily? I stared at the blue bubble, my heart hammering as it moved upward and settled. Those 6 words felt heavier than anything I'd carried up from the basement laundry in years. The 3 gray dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, Linda, it came out wrong. I'm just stressed. You know how important this is to me. The photos, the vibe, everything. I don't want any drama. I just want it to be beautiful. I read the message once. Twice. There was no apology. No, I'm sorry, that was cruel. Just, I'm stressed. Just, I want it to be beautiful. And somewhere in that sentence, I heard what she didn't write out loud. You're not beautiful enough to be there. My eyes burned. I swallowed, feeling the familiar hot lump rise in my throat. I wanted to say so many things. Ask her how long she'd felt this way. Ask her if every time I'd walked into their apartment, she'd wished I was someone else. Someone smaller. Someone less noticeable. Instead, I typed what I've always typed when someone hurt me, and I didn't know how to hold my own pain without apologizing for it. I understand. I hit send before I could change my mind. The word sat there between us, weak and obedient, like a dog rolling onto its back. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. I went through the motions of my routine, but everything had a strange echo, like I was watching myself from across the room. I washed dishes that didn't really need washing. I wiped down already clean counters. I refolded towels in the hallway closet for no reason. At 10:30 a.m., I sat on the couch and stared at a rerun of some house renovation show without registering a single wall being knocked down. Every few minutes, I'd pick up my phone and check for a text from Daniel. Nothing. By noon, my stomach hurt from a mix of hunger and nausea. I'd forgotten to eat breakfast, something that never happened. I made myself a turkey sandwich I didn't want and took 2 bites before pushing the plate away. The bread suddenly tasted like cardboard. My own mouth felt like it didn't belong to me. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen Emily in person. It was a few weeks earlier, January 21st, a Sunday afternoon. We'd had lunch at a trendy place downtown because Emily needed good light for photos. I remember sitting at that small metal table, my thighs pressed uncomfortably against the chair, while she held her phone above her avocado toast, trying to catch the right angle. "Move your water glass, Linda," she had said without looking at me. "It's messing up the shot." So I moved my glass. When the food came, I'd ordered a grilled chicken salad I didn't want, because Emily had made a comment the month before about me liking carb-heavy comfort foods. I remember the way her eyes had flicked down to my plate, and then to my stomach. Quick. Sharp. Measuring. We'd taken a photo together outside afterward. She'd posted it on Instagram. I saw it later that night, her standing slightly in front of me, perfectly angled, head tilted, hand on her belly. Me in the background, blurred just enough, my arm pressed tightly against my side as if I could compress myself into something less noticeable. She had tagged the location. She had tagged the restaurant. She had tagged the baby clothing brand whose little blanket peeked out of her designer bag. She had not tagged me. "Do you remember when we used to take pictures just to remember a moment?" I had asked Daniel over the phone that night, half joking, half aching. "That's just how things are now, Mom," he'd said, distracted. "It's no big deal." Maybe it wasn't a big deal to him, but it felt like a pattern to me, one I hadn't let myself trace until that message lit up my phone at 7:12 a.m. Around 2 p.m., the sky outside turned a flat, gray-white, the kind that makes everything look colder than it already is. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the window, melting when they hit the side of the house. I made another cup of coffee, more for something to do with my hands than for the taste. My phone finally buzzed. "Daniel." "Hey, Mom. Can we talk later?" "I'm at work right now." My fingers tightened around the mug. It was a small thing. A simple text. But the fact that Emily had time to send me her unfiltered thoughts and Daniel didn't have time to call felt like a fracture I could no longer pretend wasn't there. I typed back, "It's important," then deleted it. I typed, "I saw the message from Emily," then deleted that too. I stared at the empty text field for a long moment before finally writing, "Okay. Call me when you can. Love you." I pressed send. I hated how desperate it made me feel, the way my love always seemed to show up in sentences that expected nothing in return. The afternoon crept by. At 4:15 p.m., I sat at the small kitchen table with a stack of old school papers I'd brought home last year. Certificates the kids had drawn for me, notes that said things like, "Thank you for helping me read," in shaky handwriting. I kept them in a folder labeled Good Days, for when everything else felt heavy. One drawing caught my eye. A little girl had drawn me as a stick figure with big round arms and a huge smile, standing next to a bookshelf. Above my head she'd written, "Ms. Carter makes me feel safe." Safe. It was strange, I thought, how I could be that for dozens of kids over the years, but not for myself. Not for my own son. At 5:37 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Daniel." I answered on the first ring. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice rushed, like he was already halfway out of the conversation. "Hi, honey." My voice sounded small to my own ears. "Are you busy?" "Just heading home from the office." "What's up?" There it was. The opening. The door I'd always been too afraid to walk through. "I got a text from Emily this morning," I said carefully. Silence. I could hear the faint noise of traffic in the background. "Okay," he said slowly. "It was about the baby shower," I continued. "I don't think she meant to send it to me." She said she doesn't want your fat mom stealing attention on her day. The word fat caught in my throat, thick and bitter. He exhaled sharply. Oh my God. She sent that to you? Yes. Jesus. There was another pause. Look, Mom, she's just stressed, okay? She didn't mean it like that. I felt something in my chest twist. She wrote it, Daniel, I said quietly. She said she doesn't want me there. That I'd ruin the pictures. I need to know if you feel the same way. He was quiet for a beat too long. It's not about you, he said finally. It's about the event. Emily has a vision for it, and you know how you can get emotional. She just wants everything to go smoothly. My hand tightened around the edge of the table. How I can get emotional, I repeated. Because I cry easily, you mean? Mom, come on, he said, his tone shifting into that familiar mix of frustration and condescension I'd heard since he was a teenager. You know you take things personally. We just don't want drama. It's supposed to be a happy day. Happy for who, I wanted to ask. For the curated guest list? For the photos that would get 1,000 likes? For the perfect, slim women in pastel dresses holding tiny cupcakes while I stayed home, out of frame, out of mind? So I'm not invited, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom, it's not like that, he said, which was exactly what people always said when it was exactly like that. It's just going to be a small thing with some of Emily's friends from yoga and work. We're planning something else later. Maybe a family dinner. You know we love you. The words sounded cheap. Rehearsed. Like something you say to close a conversation, not open your heart. I looked around my quiet kitchen, at the fridge covered in old magnets and fading photos. There was one picture of Daniel at 6 years old, holding up a crooked paper heart he'd cut out for Valentine's Day. In shaky letters it said, "To the best mom in the world." Somewhere between that paper heart and this phone call, I had become an inconvenience. My eyes filled with tears. You love me, I said, my voice shaking. But you're okay with your wife calling me fat and banning me from the baby shower? He sighed. She didn't ban you, she doesn't want me there, Daniel, I said, louder than I meant to. The word echoed in the empty kitchen. And you're defending her. There was a long stretch of silence. I could hear his turn signal clicking in the background, steady and indifferent. I'm trying to keep the peace, he said finally. I don't want to fight with my wife in the middle of her pregnancy. Can you please not make this harder than it already is? The words hit me harder than Emily's text. Can you please not make this harder? I realized in that moment that my son saw me not as a person who had been hurt, but as a potential problem to manage. I swallowed, the tears still hot on my cheeks. I see, I said. So I'm the problem. I didn't say that, he replied quickly. You didn't have to, I whispered. Another silence. Then, softer, almost guilty. We'll do something special, okay? Just you and me. After the shower. I promise. A consolation prize. A private little moment, hidden away from the cameras, from the curated guest list, from the slim silhouettes and pastel balloons. For a second, the old version of me almost said, okay, honey. Whatever works for you. The version that always folded herself up to fit into whatever space people allowed her. The version that took crumbs and called it love. But something about hearing my son's voice, so casual while my whole world felt like it was cracking, shifted something inside me. I realized how many times I had chosen silence over confrontation. How many times I had laughed off hurtful comments about my weight. How many times I had stood in the back of photos, in the corner of rooms, on the edge of conversations, telling myself at least I was included. And now I wasn't even that. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, are you still there? I wiped my face with the back of my hand. Yes, I said. Please don't be mad, he said, sounding younger for a moment. This is just how things are now. These events are more for social media, you know? Emily wants everything to look a certain way. And I don't fit that look, I said quietly. He didn't answer. That was my answer. Something inside me, something that had been lying very, very still for a very long time, sat up. I heard my own voice when I spoke next, and it surprised me. It was still soft, still gentle. But there was an edge to it I wasn't used to hearing, not from myself. Okay, Daniel, I said. If that's how it is, I won't go. He exhaled in what sounded like relief. Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd understand. I'll call you later, okay? He hung up before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, the kitchen clock ticking loudly above the sink. 6:02 p.m. The sky outside had turned dark. The first guests for the baby shower, I knew, would be arriving in a couple of weeks, on a Saturday afternoon in a rented event space with string lights and neutral tone decorations. There would be a dessert table and a photo backdrop and a sign that said, "Oh baby," in cursive. And I would not be there. For the first time in my life, I felt something more than sadness. More than shame. It was anger, sharp and clear. Not the wild, explosive kind I'd always been afraid of, but a quiet, focused anger that settled in my chest like a stone. It wasn't just about being fat. It wasn't just about a baby shower. It was about all the times I had made myself small for people who never once tried to make room for me. I stood up slowly and walked to the hallway mirror. The one I usually avoided unless I needed to quickly check if there was something in my teeth before leaving the house. I forced myself to look. Soft cheeks. Double chin. Wide shoulders. Full arms. The belly I'd been taught to hate since I was 12 years old. All of me, reflected in that cheap frame from Target. For a moment, I heard Emily's voice in my head, sharp and dismissive. I don't want his fat mom stealing attention on my day. Then underneath it, I heard something else. A different voice. My own, but older. Tired. Done. What if just for once I made a day mine? The thought terrified me. It also thrilled me. On February 9th at 6:07 p.m., standing in my narrow hallway in Columbus, Ohio, with my son's dismissal still echoing in my ears, I picked up my phone again. Not to beg. Not to apologize. But to make a decision I never imagined I'd make. I opened a new note and typed 4 words that felt like stepping over an invisible line I'd spent my whole life tiptoeing around. I won't be invisible anymore. That night I barely slept. I lay in bed listening to the furnace kick on and off, the quiet hum filling the house like a heartbeat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the message on my phone again. Fat mom. Stealing attention. My day. The words repeated themselves like a cruel screensaver behind my eyelids, looping until I didn't know if I was awake or dreaming. Around 2:40 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen. The tile was cold under my feet, and for a moment the chill grounded me. I poured myself a glass of water, wiped the condensation from my fingers onto my pajama shirt, and leaned against the counter. The house was completely silent except for the refrigerator humming and the distant sound of a car driving down the empty street. It struck me then painfully how alone I felt. Not the peaceful kind of alone that comes from choosing solitude, but the hollow kind that settles in your chest when the people who are supposed to love you most make you feel like a burden. I thought about calling Daniel, even though I knew he'd be asleep. I imagined telling him everything. How the message felt like a punch to the stomach, how his reaction hurt even more, how I had always shown up for him, always, even on days when I could barely get out of bed. I imagined him hearing the tremor in my voice, finally understanding the weight of his words. But then another image came, clearer and sharper. Him sighing again, telling me I was taking things too personally, telling me I was making it about me. I set the phone down. By morning, the exhaustion felt like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. I made coffee and toast, though I barely touched either. The sky outside was a soft, milky gray, the kind that promises more snow. The street looked almost peaceful. But inside my chest, everything felt unsteady. At 10:15 a.m., my neighbor, Mrs. Harper, knocked on my door. She's in her 70s, soft-spoken, still curls her hair every morning. She was holding a small tin of chocolate chip cookies she'd baked. "Thought you might want a little treat," she said with a smile. It was such a simple gesture that my eyes filled instantly. She must have seen it because her smile softened. "Are you all right, dear?" I nodded quickly, too quickly. "Just tired." She patted my arm, her hand warm and light. "Well, I'm right next door if you ever need anything." After she left, I placed the tin of cookies on the kitchen table and stared at it. It struck me how kindness from a near stranger felt more comforting than the hollow promises from my own son. By the afternoon, I couldn't pretend anymore that everything was normal. My body felt heavy with sadness, but something else had begun to stir too. A spark of defiance, small but real. It was the same spark that had made me write that note the night before. I won't be invisible anymore. I wasn't sure what that meant yet. But the word stayed with me, warm and steady at the back of my mind. Around 3 p.m., I finally forced myself to go outside. The sidewalks were dusted with fresh snow, and my breath formed little clouds in the cold air. I wrapped my scarf around my neck and walked slowly to the mailbox. Moving felt good, grounding. Every step reminded me I existed, that I was here, that I had weight in the world, whether Emily liked it or not. When I opened the mailbox, a single envelope sat inside, white, crisp, addressed to me in a handwriting I didn't recognize. The return address was from a counseling center 2 streets over. I frowned, confused, until I remembered something I had signed up for months earlier, but never followed through with. A waitlist for grief support sessions after retiring from the school. I slid the envelope open right there on the sidewalk. Inside was a simple letter. "Your consultation appointment is available. Please call to schedule." I stood still for a moment, snow drifting softly around me. It felt like the universe was offering me something, a lifeline, a small permission to take up space in a room where my feelings were allowed to exist. I tucked the letter into my coat pocket and walked back inside. That evening, Daniel finally called again. I answered, my voice steady. "Hey, Mom," he said, sounding distracted. "How are you?" "I'm okay," I said. "Just thinking." He hesitated. "Look, about yesterday." "It's all right." I lied, even though it wasn't. "You don't have to explain." "I just want everyone to get along," he said, almost pleading. "Emily is stressed." I'm stressed. This pregnancy has been really hard on her emotionally. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Her stress mattered. My hurt didn't. Daniel, I said softly. Can I ask you something? Sure. When did you stop seeing me as part of your life? Really seeing me? There was a pause so long I thought the call had dropped. What are you talking about? He said finally, but his voice had changed, defensive now tense. I'm your mother, I said. You used to tell me everything. You used to come to me when you were scared or excited or hurt. And now it feels like I'm just someone you maneuver around to keep things easy. Mom, that's not fair, he said. People grow up. Things change. I know, I said. But they're not supposed to change like this. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like a wall. I don't want to fight, he said, sounding drained. Can we just let this go? Please. For me. For me. There it was, the final twist of the knife. Not once had he asked how I felt. Only what he needed from me. Only peace, silence, compliance. And for the first time, I didn't agree. I can't let it go, I said. My voice was soft but steady. Not this time. He sighed deeply. Mom, I love you, I said. More than anything. But I can't keep shrinking myself to make you or Emily comfortable. He didn't answer. I heard the quiet sound of him breathing. The distance between us felt bigger than ever. I'm going to take some time for myself, I continued, surprising even myself. I don't know what that means yet. But I'm going to figure it out. Another silence. Then quietly. Okay. If that's what you need. It wasn't approval. It wasn't support. It was resignation. But even that felt like a kind of doorway. After we hung up, I sat in the living room without turning on the lights. The house was dark but peaceful. Outside, snow kept falling in soft sheets, blurring the streetlights until everything glowed faintly orange. I picked up the letter from the counseling center. For a long moment, I held it in both hands, feeling the smoothness of the paper, the weight of possibility. Then I dialed the number. A gentle voice answered, and I found myself saying words I never expected to say out loud. Hi, my name is Linda Carter. I think I'm ready to schedule that appointment. My voice trembled, but not from fear. From relief. As I hung up, a strange calm washed over me. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had taken a step toward myself instead of away. Later that night, as I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection again. The same round face, the same soft body, the same features I had spent a lifetime trying to hide. But something was different. I didn't look away. And that was the first small turn. The first quiet revolt. The first crack of light. I didn't know it yet, not fully, but this was the beginning of the first real reviravolta in my life. The moment the version of me who apologized for existing began to fade, making room for someone I had never been allowed to meet. Someone who wasn't going to disappear quietly. Someone who was finally stepping into the frame. The following morning, I woke up before my alarm even buzzed. A thin band of pale light stretched across my bedroom ceiling, the kind that arrives in winter long before the sun fully commits to rising. My chest felt tight, but not in the suffocating way of the day before. It was more like something inside me had been shaken awake, and it hadn't settled back into place yet. I moved slowly, aware of my body in a way I usually tried to avoid. Every shift of weight, every stretch of my arms, every brush of my thighs when I walked across the room felt like a reminder that I existed. Not a shadow in someone else's life. Not a burden hidden behind curated photos. A woman. A full-sized one. One with breath and grief, and something new humming beneath the grief. I made coffee, though my hands trembled a little as I poured it. The scent filled the kitchen, warm and familiar. For a moment, it made me think of all the mornings when Daniel was little, when he'd climb onto the counter and chatter about superheroes while I made him oatmeal. I used to think the years would bring us closer, that the bond between us would grow, not shrink. Instead, adulthood had swept him into a world where people like me didn't fit the aesthetic. I sat at the table with my mug and my phone, debating whether I should check social media. A part of me didn't want to know anything about the baby shower planning. But another part, the one that had been wounded so deeply it still throbbed, wanted to see if Emily had posted anything that confirmed what I already suspected. That she had created a world where I didn't belong, and was proud of it. Against my better judgment, I opened her Instagram. There it was. A picture from the day before. Emily in a pale pink sweater dress, holding a tiny stuffed elephant against her belly. The caption read, "Baby shower prep day. Can't wait for everything to be perfect." Perfect. Comments flooded beneath the photo. "You're glowing. Gorgeous mama. Can't wait to see the shower pics." Not one person knew the truth behind that curated glow. That someone had been cut out intentionally, cruelly, because she wasn't photogenic enough to match the theme. I put the phone down. Just then it buzzed again. A text from Emily. "Hi Linda. Just checking in. Hope you're okay." The casual tone made my stomach clench. I stared at the message so long the phone dimmed. I wanted to ask her why she bothered pretending to care. I wanted to ask if she realized how deeply her words had cut. I wanted to ask if she even saw me as a person. But instead, I turned the phone face down on the table. I wasn't ready to have that conversation. Not yet. Not until I could trust myself not to shrink under her gaze, not to fold into the smallest version of myself out of habit. A little before noon, the counseling center called to confirm my appointment for the following Tuesday at 3 p.m. The woman on the phone, a receptionist named Marlene, had a soothing voice that made me feel steady for a moment. She asked if I needed directions, if I had transportation, if I had any questions about the session. I didn't, but her gentle concern felt like balm on an open wound. After I hung up, I stood in the living room staring at the framed photos on the shelf. One of them was from Daniel's college graduation. I was wearing a floral dress that day, one I had bought specifically because I hoped it would camouflage my stomach. I remember being so happy, so proud, standing beside him while someone snapped the picture. But as I looked at it now, I could see something I hadn't seen then. Daniel was angled slightly away from me, not enough to be obvious, but enough that it suddenly felt intentional. Emily was in the picture too, of course, young, white-teethed, perfectly styled even though it was hot outside. She was standing closer to Daniel than I was. A gap. Small but real. Maybe that gap had been there longer than I wanted to admit. I grabbed my coat and decided to take a walk to clear my mind. The air was sharp and cold, but it woke me up. I walked past the school where I had worked for 3 decades. The playground was covered in snow, little footprints scattered across the white surface. The sight tugged at my heart in a way I wasn't expecting. I missed that life, the laughter, the noise, the purpose. I missed the version of myself who felt needed. At the corner of Maple and 3rd, I ducked into a small cafe called Bluebird Coffee. I hadn't been there in years. It used to be a place I only visited with co-workers after stressful days, sitting at the round wooden tables while we complained about the budget cuts and the copy machine that always broke. The barista, a young man with curly hair and a silver nose ring, looked up and smiled. "What can I get started for you?" I hesitated a moment. My usual instinct was to order something safe, meaning something that wouldn't draw attention. Something small. Something that made me seem like I was trying. But today I heard myself say, "A hazelnut latte, please. Large." My voice sounded foreign even to me. The barista typed it in without a second glance. No raised eyebrow, no judgmental smirk. Just a smile and a coming right up. I sat near the window, watching cars pass by while the espresso machine hissed and steamed behind the counter. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself truly exist in a public space without trying to disappear. My phone buzzed on the table. "Daniel." "Mom, I think you misunderstood what I meant last night. I didn't want you to feel bad." I closed my eyes. Wanting someone not to feel bad and wanting to make things right are two very different things. Before I could respond, another message came through. "Emily is worried you're upset. Can you please reassure her?" Reassure her. The woman who humiliated me. The woman who excluded me. The woman who didn't want me in pictures because I ruined her aesthetic. I didn't respond. I sat there with my latte warming my hands, and I let the truth settle inside me like a stone. They didn't want me to be okay. They wanted me to be quiet. They wanted me to smooth things over, take responsibility for the discomfort their choices caused, absorb the guilt so they wouldn't have to. For years, I had done exactly that. But now, the thought of doing it again made something tighten in my chest, not fear this time, but resistance. When I finally stood to leave, I felt steadier than I had in days. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky was brighter, a pale blue stretching endlessly above the street. I walked slowly toward home, breathing in the crisp air, feeling like each step grounded me more firmly into the earth. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I opened the note app on my phone again. "I won't be invisible anymore," I had written the day before. Beneath it, I typed another line. "I will stop apologizing for my existence." The words didn't solve anything, but they felt like bricks, heavy, solid, forming the beginning of something strong. Something that could hold weight without collapsing. Over the next few days, things felt strangely quiet. Emily didn't text again. Daniel sent a few short messages, weather updates, a meme about a dog in the snow, nothing real. It was like he was skirting around the wound, trying to pretend it wasn't there. On Monday night, I got a notification from Facebook. A photo had been uploaded to a private group that Emily was part of. I wasn't in the group, but one of my coworkers, a woman named Janine, had forwarded it to me in a private message. "I'm so sorry," she wrote. "Thought you should see this." The picture showed a mock-up of the baby shower decor. Neutral tones, cream balloons, gold lettering, delicate cookies shaped like baby bottles and tiny rattles. And in the center, a seating area with chairs arranged for what looked like a photo opportunity. There were assigned seats. Name tags visible. Emily's mother. Emily's sister. 2 bridesmaids from her wedding. But no seat for me. Not even an empty one. The message below the picture read, "Almost finalized. The vibe is going to be perfect. keeping the guest list small to maintain the aesthetic. Aesthetic. The word hit me like a slap. I wasn't family to her. I wasn't welcome. I was clutter. Noise. A flaw. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. Not hot, angry tears this time, but deep, aching tears that came from somewhere old and wounded. I put the phone down and walked to the bathroom. I splashed my face with cold water, breathing slowly, gripping the sink until the shaking in my hands stopped. When I finally looked up into the mirror, my eyes were red, my cheeks wet, my hair disheveled. But for the first time, I didn't see someone pathetic. I saw someone hurt. And someone hurt deserves care. Not shame. Not silence. When Tuesday came, I drove to the counseling center through light snow. The building was small, tucked between a dentist's office and a bakery. Inside, the waiting room was warm and smelled faintly of vanilla. Soft music played from somewhere unseen. A woman stepped into the waiting room and smiled warmly. She wore a forest green cardigan and had gentle eyes that made me feel safe almost instantly. "Linda," she said. "Yes," I answered. "I'm Caroline. It's nice to meet you. Come on back." Her office was cozy, filled with plants and soft lighting. I sat down on the couch, feeling strangely exposed. "So," she said gently, settling into her chair, "tell me what brought you here." I took a breath, the kind that made my chest feel like it might burst. "My daughter-in-law doesn't want me at her baby shower," I said, my voice trembling. "Because of my weight." Caroline didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't look away. "How did that make you feel?" she asked. I opened my mouth. For a moment, nothing came out. Then the words began to spill, halting at first, then faster, like a dam cracking. "It made me feel small," I whispered. "Like I don't matter. Like I'm embarrassing. Like I'm a problem they're trying to hide." My eyes filled again, tears rolling unchecked. "And I realized," I continued, voice breaking, "that it's not the first time I've felt that way. Not with Emily. Not with Daniel. Not even with my own family when I was growing up. I've spent my whole life apologizing for my body. For taking up space. For existing." Caroline nodded slowly. "And what do you want now?" she asked. I didn't have to think. "I want to stop feeling ashamed for being alive," I said. The words felt like they cracked open something deep inside me. Caroline nodded again, her voice soft. "That's a good place to start." As I walked out of the center 45 minutes later, the air outside felt different. Sharper, colder, almost invigorating. Snowflakes drifted down again, but this time they felt gentle, not heavy. I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel and realized that for the first time in my life, I had spoken honestly about my pain. Without minimizing it. Without apologizing. Without laughing it off. It felt terrifying. It felt freeing. It felt like the beginning of something I didn't yet have a name for. That night, I made myself a simple dinner. Tomato soup and grilled cheese. Comfort food. Not diet food. Not shame food. Just food that tasted good and warmed my stomach. As I ate, my phone buzzed again. "Daniel. Mom, Emily's been crying all day. She thinks you're angry at her. Can you please call her?" The request made my whole body go cold. There it was again. Their comfort over my pain. Their peace over my dignity. Their image over my humanity. Slowly, deliberately, I set the phone down. I did not call. And somewhere inside me, a second shift began. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet certainty spreading through my chest like warmth. I was done being the one who always soothed others. For the first time, I was choosing myself. And I didn't know it then, not fully. But this was the moment that would lead to the second reviravolta of my story. The moment when choosing myself would be seen not as healing, but as rebellion. The next morning, the first thing I noticed was the hollow quiet in the house. No television, no kettle whistling, no phone buzzing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creaks of an old house adjusting to the winter cold. It was the kind of silence that used to make me anxious, like something was missing. But today it felt intentional. Like the world had stepped back a little and given me room to breathe. I shuffled to the kitchen, pulling my robe tighter around me. As I filled the kettle with water, I caught myself glancing at my phone on the counter, half expecting a message from Daniel or Emily. There was nothing. Just the dark, black screen, indifferent. I made tea instead of coffee. Chamomile. Calming, the box promised. My mind kept drifting back to Caroline's office. Her calm eyes, the way she didn't flinch when I said the word fat out loud. The way she didn't rush to fix it or to reassure me that I wasn't that big. She just listened. Like my pain didn't need to be softened or explained away. "You've spent a long time carrying other people's shame," she had said at one point, her voice steady. "And calling it your own." I'd sat there, stunned, because it was exactly that. My mother's shame at having a bigger daughter. My aunt's shame at what the neighbors would say. Emily's shame at what her friends might think if I stood beside her in photos. I had been the one absorbing it. I sipped my tea and stared out the window. Snow still clung stubbornly to the roofs and cars, but the streets were clear. Life kept moving, with or without permission. My phone lit up, breaking the stillness. A text from Janine. How did your first session go? Been thinking of you. I typed back slowly. It was hard, but good. I cried a lot. Her reply came quickly. Crying is good. Means you're not numbing it anymore. Proud of you. I stared at those words. Proud of you. I couldn't remember the last time someone said that to me and meant it without conditions. Later that afternoon, I sat at the dining table with an old notebook I'd found in a drawer. The first few pages were filled with grocery lists and reminders to call the dentist, then blank. I turned to a clean page, uncapped a pen, and hesitated. Caroline had suggested I write things down. Sometimes you've been silenced for so long that your voice feels rusty, she said. Writing can help loosen it. So I wrote. At first, it was just fragments. I am tired of apologizing. I am not a mistake. My body is not a problem to solve. The handwriting looked shaky, unfamiliar. But seeing the words there, ink pressed into paper, made them feel more real. Less like wishes, more like declarations. A few days passed like this. Quiet mornings. Slow walks in the neighborhood. Sessions with Caroline once a week. Long showers where I let myself cry without muffling the sound. In that time, the baby shower crept closer, like a date written on the wall of a cell, carved in whether you wanted it or not. I knew the exact day. Saturday, February 25th, 2 p.m. 2 weeks from the day Emily's message had arrived. 2 weeks from the day something inside me had cracked open. The week before the shower, Daniel called again. It was a Wednesday evening, 7:18 p.m. I remember the time because the local news had just started, and I muted the TV to answer. Hey, he said, sounding careful. How've you been? Fine, I said, which wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't a lie either. You? Busy, he replied. Lots going on with the shower planning. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. I'm sure. Look, he started, clearing his throat. I just wanted to check in. I know things have been tense. I waited. Emily's been anxious, he continued. She feels like you hate her now. I almost laughed at that, but there was no humor in it. The idea that her biggest concern in all of this was whether I liked her, not whether she had hurt me, felt almost surreal. I don't hate her, I said. But I am hurt. I know, he said quickly. And I'm sorry for that. I really am. But I'm in the middle here, Mom. I'm trying to keep everything balanced. Balanced. As if my exclusion and their comfort were equal weights on a scale. Balanced would have been you saying, this isn't okay, I said quietly. Balanced would have been you standing up for me. He didn't respond. Instead, he said, we're still planning that dinner, you know. Just the three of us. After the baby's born. Make things right. Make things right. Like a bandage slapped over a wound that was never cleaned. I didn't trust my voice not to break, so I just said, we'll see. I could almost hear him frowning through the phone. Right, he said after a moment. Well, I have to go. Lots to finish up before the weekend. Before the weekend. Before the shower. After we hung up, I sat there in the dim light of the living room, surrounded by old pictures and furniture that had outlasted relationships. I realized I'd been waiting for Daniel to show up as the son I believed he was, kind, loyal, brave. Instead, he kept showing up as someone else. Scared of conflict, loyal to appearances, willing to sacrifice my dignity to keep the peace. For the first time, I allowed myself to see that both versions could be true. He was my son. He was also hurting me. And I had a choice in how much of that hurt I would allow. The night before the shower, I couldn't resist checking Emily's Instagram again. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it would hurt. But pain has a way of pulling you toward it, demanding to be looked at. She had posted a photo of neatly arranged gift bags, each one tied with a gold ribbon. Tomorrow's the day, the caption read. Can't wait to celebrate our little miracle with my favorite people. Favorite people. I wasn't one of them. I turned off my phone and set it on the nightstand. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Caroline's question from our last session. If you weren't so focused on making sure everyone else was comfortable, she had asked, what would you do with your life? What would you do with your time? With your days? I hadn't known how to answer. The question felt too big, like asking a plant raised in the dark what it would do if someone suddenly opened a window and let the sun flood in. Eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep. Saturday arrived gray and cold. I woke up at 7 a.m. to a quiet that felt different than usual. It wasn't empty. It was thick, expectant, like the day was waiting to see what I would do with it. In another part of the city, I knew Emily would be waking up to a flurry of activity. Hair appointments, makeup, final decorations. She would put on a carefully chosen dress that skimmed her small, neat bump. She would stand in front of a mirror and adjust herself until she looked like the version of motherhood she wanted the world to see. I made myself oatmeal and sliced a banana into it, my hands moving on autopilot. The clock on the microwave read 7:24 a.m. For a moment, I imagined myself getting dressed, driving across town, walking into that room uninvited. I pictured the shock on people's faces, the way conversations would stutter and stall. I pictured Emily's tight smile, the way her eyes would flash. "You weren't supposed to be here," she might say, her voice low and furious. And I would reply, "I wasn't supposed to be unwanted either." The fantasy gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. But I knew it wasn't what I really wanted. I didn't want to fight to be in a room where I was already unwelcome. I wanted something else. I just didn't know what. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Janine. "Hey, I know today might be rough. Want to do something? Brunch? Walk? Anything?" I stared at the message. My first instinct was to say no. To curl up on the couch, scroll through social media, and let the day crush me. To watch from a distance as my own grandchild's celebration unfolded without me, like I was a stranger peering through a window. But then I thought of that note in my phone. I won't be invisible anymore. My fingers moved before my fear could stop them. "Yes," I typed. "Brunch." We met at 11:30 at a small place called Willow Street Diner, halfway between our houses. It was the kind of spot that had sticky menus, vinyl booths, and regulars who didn't need to order because the staff already knew what they wanted. When I walked in, Janine was already sitting in a booth by the window. She waved me over with a wide smile. Then her face softened when she saw me up close. "Hey you," she said, standing to hug me. "How are you holding up?" Her hug was warm, solid. I hadn't realized how much I needed that simple human contact. "I'm here," I said. We sat. She ordered pancakes. I ordered an omelet and actually chose the side of hash browns instead of fruit, just because I wanted it. As we ate, Janine listened. Really listened. I told her about the message, the fat mom comment, the way being excluded felt like being erased. I told her about Daniel's reaction, the way he kept trying to smooth things over instead of standing up for me. At one point, I said, "It's like I've spent my whole life being grateful just to be in the room. Any room. Even if I'm in the far corner. Even if I'm the joke. Even if I'm the before picture. And now they don't even want me in the room at all." Janine put her fork down and shook her head. "That's cruel," she said simply. "Not just thoughtless. Cruel. And I'm so sorry." Her certainty made something in me unclench. For weeks, I'd been twisting myself into knots, wondering if I was overreacting, if I was being too sensitive, if maybe I deserved this because I wasn't thin or glamorous or photogenic. But here was someone neutral. Someone who wasn't family. Someone who saw it clearly. "Cruel. I keep thinking," I whispered. "If I were smaller, if I had lost the weight, this wouldn't be happening." Janine's expression hardened. "Linda," she said firmly, "if someone only respects you as long as you're shrinking, they don't respect you. They're controlling you." The words landed with such force that I had to look down. Controlling. It was a new angle. A clearer one. "I feel like there's something wrong with me," I admitted. "That I'm the one who needs to change, not them." Janine shook her head again. "There is nothing wrong with existing in your body," she said. "There is a lot wrong with people who treat your body like a problem." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The diner buzzed around us, servers refilling mugs, silverware clinking, someone laughing too loudly in the corner booth. The normalcy of it all felt almost surreal, knowing that across town, a perfectly curated event was being arranged where my absence was part of the design. When the plates were cleared and we were nursing our second cups of coffee, Janine looked at me thoughtfully. "Do you have any plans for this afternoon?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not really." "Good," she said. "Because I have an idea." The idea, it turned out, was something I hadn't done for myself in years. "Let's go shopping," she said. "Not for anyone else. Not for a gift. For you." I felt myself stiffen slightly. "I don't really," I started. "Clothes shopping isn't exactly my favorite thing." "I know," she said gently. "But maybe that's because you've only ever done it as a punishment. You know, going to the store after a doctor told you to lose weight, or trying on clothes for someone else's event, thinking about how you're going to look in pictures. What if today, for once, we just picked things that make you feel good in your own skin?" The idea felt dangerous. Indulgent. Beautiful. "I don't know," I murmured. "It feels selfish." Janine smiled sadly. "You raised a son. You worked for 30 years helping kids who weren't yours feel safe and seen. You've spent decades shrinking yourself to make everyone else comfortable. Buying a couple of outfits that make you feel like a human being is not selfish, Linda." Something in me softened. "Maybe just to look," I said. "Just to look," she agreed, though her eyes said she hoped for more. We drove to a plus-size boutique on the east side of town, a place I'd passed 100 times but never dared to enter. The mannequins in the window wore bright colors, bold patterns, jeans with real stretch, and tops that didn't pretend larger bodies were supposed to be hidden in black tents. My heart thudded as we walked up to the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of fabric and perfume. A woman about my age with short, curly hair approached us with a warm smile. "Welcome in," she said. "Let me know if you need any help." I waited for the usual glance up and down, the subtle disapproval I'd grown used to in regular stores, where anything above a size 12 was relegated to a sad corner. It didn't come. Her gaze was kind. Neutral. She looked at me like a customer, not a problem. Janine nudged me gently. Go on. Look around. I walked slowly between the racks, trailing my fingers over soft sweaters, floral blouses, jeans that actually looked like they would fit my hips without cutting into my waist. Every tag I flipped over had my size. Not hidden. Not online only. Right there. My throat tightened unexpectedly. For a few minutes, I forgot about the time. Forgot that at that exact moment, somewhere across town, guests were probably arriving at a venue with gold balloons and a photo backdrop. I was here, in a place where my body was considered on purpose. Janine held up a deep teal dress with 3/4 sleeves and a gentle A-line shape. This would look gorgeous on you, she said. I shook my head automatically. I don't wear dresses like that. Why not? Because someone might look, I said, before I could stop myself. She raised an eyebrow. Is that always a bad thing? I couldn't answer. Eventually, with gentle pressure from her and genuine encouragement from the saleswoman, I ended up in a fitting room with 3 items. The teal dress, a pair of dark wash jeans, and a soft cream sweater. I stared at my reflection before I even tried anything on. Harsh fluorescent lights, a full-length mirror. This had always been my personal version of hell. Take your time, Janine called from outside. And remember, nothing you see is a moral failure. It's just a body. Just a body. I took a deep breath and pulled the dress over my head. When I turned toward the mirror, my heart skipped. It fit. Not just physically. It fit me. The color brought warmth to my face, made my eyes look brighter. The fabric skimmed my curves without clinging, draping over my stomach in a way that felt gentle. Respectful. Like it didn't see my shape as an offense. For the first time in years, I didn't suck in my stomach instinctively. I didn't pinch my arms. I just stood there, looking. Can I see? Janine asked. My instinct was to say no. To hide. To change back into my old clothes and pretend this never happened. Instead, I opened the door. Her eyes widened. Oh my God, Linda. You look beautiful. The word hit me harder than I expected. Beautiful. Not flattering. That backhanded compliment that always meant, it hides the parts of you people don't want to see. Beautiful. You're just saying that, I muttered. No, she said firmly. I'm really not. Look at yourself. Really look. So I did. And what I saw wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a movie makeover. I was still me. Still round. Still soft. Still the same body that the world had told me was wrong. But for the first time, I saw something else too. I saw a woman who had survived every cruel comment, every exclusion, every doctor's appointment where the solution to any problem, from headaches to knee pain, had been lose weight. I saw someone who had kept showing up anyway. I swallowed hard. I don't know how to be this person, I whispered. What person? Janine asked gently. The person who doesn't hate herself, I said. She smiled. You don't have to know yet. You just have to be willing to meet her. We bought the dress. Not for a funeral. Not for a job interview. Not for someone else's event. For me. By the time we left the store, the sky had shifted from gray to a soft blue. The streets were still damp, reflecting headlights as cars drove past. I checked the time on my phone. 3:03 p.m. The baby shower would be in full swing. I imagined the photos being taken. The clink of glasses, the chorus of "Os" as gifts were opened, the way everyone would praise Emily for the thoughtful details. There would be group shots of friends gathered around her, hands on her belly laughing. I wasn't there. And for the first time since this whole mess began, the thought didn't feel like a knife twisting in my chest. It felt like a fact. Painful, but survivable. Later that night, after I got home and hung the dress carefully in my closet, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my phone. There they were. The photos. Emily had already started posting. A boomerang of her popping a confetti cannon. A shot of the dessert table. A group photo in front of the balloon arch. I zoomed in on the last one. Her mother. Her sister. Her friends. All thin. All smiling. All dressed in shades of cream, blush, and gold. My absence was a blank space no one even knew was supposed to be filled. My first instinct was to close the app, throw the phone across the room, crawl under the covers, and disappear. Instead, I did something else. I opened Facebook. I clicked on the status box. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. I knew that whatever I wrote next would be a line I couldn't uncross. Then slowly I began to type. Today was my daughter-in-law's baby shower. I wasn't invited. Not because I live far away, not because of illness, not because of limited space. I wasn't invited because I'm fat. Because my body doesn't fit the aesthetic. Because someone decided that my presence in the background of photos would ruin her day. I've spent my whole life shrinking myself, apologizing for my size, laughing off hurtful comments. Today, I bought myself a dress instead. Today, I let myself feel the pain instead of pretending it didn't matter. Today, I realized that exclusion says nothing about my worth, and everything about theirs. I stared at the words on the screen, my thumb hovering over post. For a moment, fear screamed inside me. What if people judge you? What if Daniel gets angry? What if this makes everything worse? But another voice, quieter and older, answered back. It's already bad. You're already hurt. At least let the truth exist somewhere outside your own body. I hit post. My hands were shaking so hard I had to set the phone down. I had no idea what would happen next. I just knew that for the first time in a very long time, I had chosen to tell my story instead of hiding it. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the grief and the generational shame, something powerful began to unfurl. Not anger. Not revenge. Just the simple, radical belief that I deserved to be seen. That night, as I lay in bed with my phone lighting up beside me, notifications chiming one after another, I had no idea that this small act, this raw confession written in a dim bedroom in Columbus, Ohio, would be the spark that changed everything. Not just for me, but for how my son, my family, and even strangers would see me from that day forward. By the time I woke the next morning, my phone was still buzzing. At first, I thought it was an alarm, but then I saw the notification light blinking insistently, a pulsing reminder that something had shifted in the world while I slept. My heart pounded as I reached for the phone. For a split second, panic clawed up my throat. Had I made everything worse? Had Daniel called? Had Emily posted something in retaliation? But when I unlocked the screen, what I saw wasn't anger. It was support. Dozens of notifications. Then hundreds. Comment after comment on my post. You deserved better than that. I went through something similar. You're not alone. This broke my heart. Please keep speaking. One day your grandchild will know what kind of woman you are. Strong. Women from church. Old coworkers. Neighbors. Even people I barely remembered from the elementary school. Some comments were from complete strangers, friends of friends who had seen the post shared. And shared again. And again. My hands trembled as I scrolled. The post had been shared over 400 times by morning. By noon it would be nearly 1,000. I didn't know what to do with the sudden flood of empathy. I'd spent years keeping my pain hidden in the dark, folded neatly into places no one ever looked. Seeing strangers shine light into those places felt overwhelming and tender. But not everyone reacted with kindness. I saw Daniel's name appear on my screen just after 9 a.m. Not a call. A comment. Mom, can you please take this down? This is a private family matter, and posting about it publicly is making things worse. The message hit like a cold slap. A family matter. As if shame only counted if it happened in the dark. As if silence was more important than truth. I sat there staring at his comment, feeling the old instinct rise. The urge to delete the post, to smooth things over, to absorb the blame the way I always had. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then another comment appeared beneath his. From Janine. With respect, Daniel, sometimes private shame becomes public when the person suffering isn't heard privately. Then another from a former coworker. Your mom has been nothing but supportive and loving to everyone around her. She deserves to be treated with dignity. Then another. Sometimes silence enables cruelty. A strange feeling washed over me. Not joy, not yet, but something close to relief. Like the world wasn't gaslighting me anymore, telling me to keep my hurt quiet for the sake of others. Daniel sent me a text next. Mom, call me. Now. I didn't. Instead, I got up, showered, and dressed. For reasons I couldn't explain, I put on the new teal dress. The one that made me feel like a person instead of a shadow. The fabric slid over my skin softly, warmly. I brushed my hair and put on the simple pearl earrings I'd worn to Daniel's graduation. When I looked in the mirror, I felt something unfamiliar blooming under my ribs. Not confidence, but presence. I existed, and I looked like someone worth noticing. A little after 10 a.m., there was a knock on my door. My chest tightened. My first thought was that Daniel had shown up angry. But when I opened the door, it wasn't him. It was my sister, Laura. She lived an hour away in Dayton, and rarely visited unless there was a holiday. She was thinner than me, always had been, and had a way of walking that suggested she could slip through life without resistance. She looked at me with wide eyes. Linda, she said softly. I came as soon as I saw your post. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever come running, because I was hurting. Come in, I whispered. She hugged me before I even closed the door, a long, tight hug that made my throat close. We sat in the living room, and for a moment it felt like we were just two sisters again, not two women shaped by decades of unspoken judgments. I didn't know, she said, her voice thick. I had no idea it had gotten this bad. I looked down at my hands. It hasn't just been them, I said. It's been years. Years of comments and jokes, and being told I don't measure up. She flinched as if struck. Linda, when we were kids, did I ever make you feel that way? The answer was yes, but not in the way she feared. It wasn't her fault. She had just been repeating the lines the world had written for us. You were a child, I said gently. We all were. She took my hand. I'm here now. For some reason, those words made tears spill down my cheeks. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed someone, anyone on my side. I wiped my face quickly, embarrassed by how easily I cried these days. But Laura squeezed my hand. "Let yourself feel it," she said. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message request from a woman I didn't know. "Hi Linda. I saw your post. I run a support group for women dealing with body shame and family estrangement. If you ever want to join, our meetings are safe and private." Another message followed. "Your story helped me tell my husband that his comments about my weight hurt me. Thank you." Another. "You reminded me that I deserve love right now, not after I lose weight. Bless you." Each message felt like a hand reaching toward me in a dark room. By evening, my post had over 2,000 reactions. Emily hadn't contacted me, not directly, but she had posted something on her own page. A picture of her cradling her belly, her face pale and tight. The caption, "Trying to stay calm despite unnecessary stress. Pregnancy is hard enough without drama." Dozens of her friends commented with sympathy. "Don't let toxic people bring down your joy. You're doing amazing, Mama. She's just jealous." That last one made me laugh. A bitter, hollow sound. Jealous? Of what? Of being excluded from my own grandchild's celebration? Of being insulted behind my back? Of being reduced to an aesthetic flaw in someone else's curated life? I closed the app before the comments could swallow me whole. Later that night, Daniel finally called. This time I answered. His voice was sharp, almost panicked. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Emily's upset. People are messaging us. Her mother is furious." I closed my eyes. "Daniel," I said softly, "I told the truth. That's all." "But why publicly?" he demanded. "Why embarrass us like this?" The word embarrassed stabbed deep. "You embarrassed me," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "Both of you. And when I told you I was hurt, you dismissed me. You told me not to make things difficult." There was silence on his end. "I didn't know it meant that much to you," he said finally, but the words felt small, defensive. "It meant everything," I whispered. "You are my son. You are the person I thought would never let me stand alone." He exhaled shakily. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "You didn't want to realize," I corrected gently. "Because it was easier." He didn't argue. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift between us, like a door he had kept shut was finally creaking open. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I come over tomorrow? I want to talk. Really talk." My heart thudded hard once against my ribs. I didn't answer immediately. After everything, part of me wanted to say no. But another part, the part that still remembered his 6-year-old self holding up that crooked paper heart, knew I needed this conversation. "Yes," I said. "Come." When we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. My heart felt bruised, aching, hopeful. It was the beginning of something. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But truth. Raw and trembling. And truth is a dangerous thing because once spoken, it can't be pushed back into silence. The next morning, I woke before the sun again. The teal dress hung on my closet door, the soft folds glowing faintly in the dim light. My phone lay silent on the nightstand, but I could feel the weight of everything waiting in the hours ahead. Daniel was coming. Whether it would be healing or heartbreak, I didn't know. But for the first time, I felt ready for whatever truth he brought with him. Because I finally understood something so simple, so devastating, so freeing. His choices were his. My worth was mine. And as I stood in the hallway mirror, smoothing my hair, my heart pounding with the kind of fear that feels almost like courage, I felt it fully for the first time. I was not going back to the version of myself who apologized for breathing. I had stepped over the line. And there was no turning back. This was the third Rivera Volta beginning, even before I realized it. Because when Daniel walked through my door that afternoon, what he would say, what he would confess, would crack open everything I thought I knew about the people I loved. Daniel arrived just after 1 in the afternoon. I heard his car door shut, the fast rhythm of his footsteps in the snow, the hesitation before he finally rang the bell. I had spent the morning cleaning the kitchen more times than it needed, wiping the counters, folding and unfolding the same dish towel, wondering what version of my son would stand on the other side of that door. When I opened it, he looked tired. Not physically, though he did have dark circles under his eyes. Tired in a deeper way. A way that made my heart clench despite everything. He stepped inside quietly, brushing melting snow from his jacket. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He glanced around the house, at the framed photos, the beige couch, the vase of winter branches I'd arranged a few days earlier. His gaze settled on me. "You look nice," he murmured, almost surprised. I stiffened. "Thank you." He exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, can we sit?" We walked to the living room. He took the armchair. I sat on the couch. A gulf of air sat between us, thick and heavy, like a third person in the room. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "First, I'm sorry," he said. "About everything. About how you found out. About what Emily said. About how I handled it." My breath caught. Hearing an apology, even a tentative one, Felt like standing under warm water after weeks of cold. But I didn't speak. I needed to hear what else he would say. I messed up, he continued. I should have protected you. I should have stopped her from talking to you like that. I should have told her it wasn't okay. Still, I waited. I didn't, he said, voice thinning. Because I was afraid. This surprised me. Afraid of what? He swallowed hard. Of losing her. Of making her angry. Of causing stress during the pregnancy. She's intense, Mom. You know that. She cares so much about how things look. And I keep trying to keep the peace. I stared at him. And what about how things felt for me? His eyes flickered. That's the part I've been avoiding, he admitted. Because it's easier to pretend everything's fine. Easier to believe you'll always forgive me. My throat tightened painfully. The truth of that landed like a blow. He wasn't wrong. I had forgiven him before he even asked. Every time. My love had been unconditional, but also unquestioning. But, he said, and his voice cracked, when I saw your post, when I realized how much I hurt you, something broke open in me. I didn't know you felt invisible. I didn't know I made you feel that way. I wiped a tear with the side of my thumb. I didn't want you to see it. I didn't want to be a burden. He shook his head sharply. You're not a burden. You've never been. I didn't see the weight you carry. And that's my failure, not yours. I felt my chest squeeze with a mix of love and grief. He was trying, really trying, but the damage didn't vanish just because he finally acknowledged it. I took a slow breath. Daniel, your wife didn't just insult me. She excluded me. From something that should have been a moment for all of us. And you didn't stop her. He flinched, guilt tightening his jaw. I know, he whispered. And it's killing me. Silence drifted between us like a thin sheet of smoke. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. There's more. My stomach dropped. He ran both hands over his face. I didn't want to tell you this. I didn't think it mattered. But now I realize it does. I sat still, hands folded tightly in my lap. He took a breath, steadying himself, then looked up with an expression I couldn't read. Mom, he said, voice low and strained. Emily didn't want you at our wedding either. The room fell away. The air vanished. I felt like I'd been shoved underwater. What? I whispered, my nails digging into my palms. He nodded miserably. She said you would ruin the pictures. She didn't want a big distraction, standing near the bridal party. She tried to convince me to talk you out of being in the photos altogether. My heart slammed against my ribs. He kept talking, maybe because stopping would break him, maybe because he had finally realized the cost of silence. I fought her on it, he said. I told her you had to be there, that it wasn't negotiable. But she made me compromise. She said we'd do family photos separately. That way the main set would be cleaner. Cleaner. My vision blurred. I thought back to the wedding. I remembered being ushered aside at one point while the bridal party took quick shots. I remembered Daniel hugging me afterward and saying, "We'll get our pictures later, Mom." We never did. He took a shaky breath. I should have told you. I should have stood up for you harder. But I didn't want to ruin the day. And I thought it would go away. I felt something inside me fracture. Quietly, cleanly, like a thin plate snapped in two. Daniel, I whispered, that was one of the happiest days of your life. And all that time she was ashamed of me. He winced. I don't want to use that word. But it's the truth. Neither of us spoke. Outside, the wind rattled the window slightly, the bare branches scraping like weak fingertips. I finally found my voice. Do you understand what that means? How long she's seen me that way? How long you've let it happen? His shoulders shook. He wiped at his eyes quickly, embarrassed by his own tears. Yes, he whispered. I see it now. And I hate myself for it. My heart softened, just a fraction. Pain and love tangled inside me in a way I couldn't unravel. Mom, he said quietly. I don't know how to fix this. But I want to try. I need to try. I don't want to lose you. Something inside me trembled, then steadied. I believed he meant it. But I also knew this was not something a single apology could heal. It wasn't even about Emily anymore, not entirely. It was about every time I'd allowed myself to accept crumbs because I was grateful for any seat at the table, even one far away from everyone else. I inhaled slowly. I'm not going anywhere, I said. But things can't go back to what they were. Not after this. He nodded. I know. And you need to understand, I added softly, that I'm not shrinking anymore. Not for you. Not for her. Not for anyone. He met my eyes then, really met them. And for the first time in a long time, I saw my son, not the polished version of him Emily pushed into being. I don't want you to shrink, he whispered. I want another chance to be better. I nodded, feeling tears burning again. Then start by seeing me. Not as an obligation. Not as an embarrassment. As your mother. I do, he said. I promise I do. We talked for another hour. Not all of it was easy. Some parts stung. Some brought a strange sense of peace. The distance between us didn't vanish, but it softened. Before he left, he hugged me. A long hug. The kind he used to give me when he was little, his cheek pressed against my shoulder. "I love you, Mom," he murmured. "I love you too," I said. "Always." After he drove away, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the snow drift across the street. My heart felt bruised and tender, but also grounded. Something irreversible had happened. The truth was finally out in the open, raw, messy, uncomfortable. But truth is like a cracked window. Once it opens even a sliver, fresh air gets in. And no matter how much you try, you can't seal it back the way it was. I went to the mirror in the hallway again, the one I'd avoided for so many years. My reflection stared back, flushed cheeks, soft arms, a body that had endured decades of cruelty and still carried me through the world. For the first time, I didn't feel shame rise up like a tide. I felt something quieter. Compassion. The kind I'd given to everyone except myself. That evening, as I sat on the couch with the teal dress draped over my legs, I realized something profound. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning. And the woman I was becoming, the one who spoke, who cried openly, who refused to disappear, she was someone I was only just beginning to know. Someone I might even grow to love. A week later, something happened that I could never have expected. Something that would become the fourth crack in the life I thought I understood. A message arrived from someone who had been watching everything, quietly, compassionately from the background. A message that would shift my world in a way I still wasn't prepared for. One sentence. One invitation. One person who saw me, not as a mother, not as a burden, not as a shadow, but as a woman. And that was where everything changed again. The message came on a quiet Tuesday night while I was folding laundry. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, pairing socks that never seemed to match, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I expected another notification from my post, maybe a late comment or a private message. The surge of attention had slowed down, but little waves of it still reached me every day. When I picked up the phone, there was a new message request on Facebook. "Hi, Linda. I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. My name is Mark Bennett. I don't know if you remember me, but I used to come into the school to fix the computers. We talked a few times in the library. I saw your post. I've been thinking about it ever since." I read the message twice, my mind flipping through blurry memories like an old slideshow. The name tugged at something. I closed my eyes and pictured the school computer lab, the dusty monitors, the tangled wires. A man in a navy polo shirt, quiet, with kind eyes and dark hair going gray at the temples. He'd always said hi when he saw me. Always lingered just long enough to ask how my day was going before crawling under another desk to fix some stubborn machine. I remembered him laughing once when I panicked over accidentally unplugging a monitor. "Trust me," he'd said. "You can't break anything I can't fix." I'd liked that about him. His calmness. His patience. I opened the message again. "I've wanted to tell you for a long time that you were always one of the warmest people in that building. The kids adored you. I did too, honestly. I just never said it because I didn't want to come off as weird. Your post, it broke my heart. You didn't deserve what happened. If you ever want to grab coffee and talk to someone who already knows your worth more than what they made you feel, I'd be honored." My heart stuttered. I read that line over and over. I did too, honestly. A flush crept up my neck. At 58 years old, I thought that part of my life was over. The part where anyone could look at me and feel something like fondness, like interest, like the beginning of something that wasn't obligation or duty or pity. I sat there with the laundry forgotten in my lap, my breath shallow. Part of me wanted to ignore the message. To tell myself it wasn't real, that he was just being polite, that no one could actually mean those things about me. Another part, the one that had written "I won't be invisible anymore" in the Notes app on my phone, leaned forward. I started typing. "Hi, Mark. I do remember you. You always saved me when the computers wouldn't cooperate. Thank you for your message. I'm still figuring out how to feel about everything, but your words mean a lot." I hesitated, then added, "Coffee sounds nice. If you're sure, and if it doesn't feel strange to you." His reply came within minutes. "It doesn't feel strange at all. It feels overdue." My chest fluttered in a way I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. We made a plan to meet that Saturday at Bluebird Coffee, the same place where I'd ordered that large hazelnut latte and made a silent promise to stop apologizing for taking up space. It felt right somehow that the same place would hold this new moment too. In the days leading up to it, I kept second-guessing my decision. What if he didn't recognize me? What if he did and regretted reaching out? What if I walked in and saw disappointment flicker across his face before he could hide it? Caroline listened patiently as I spilled my fears during our next session. "What are you afraid he'll see?" she asked gently. "The real me," I said before I could stop myself. She tilted her head. "And who is the real you?" I looked down at my hands. Soft. Big. Old. Tired. Too much. She was quiet for a moment. "Or," she said softly, "warm, funny, loyal, brave, alive. You posted your truth in front of the world, Linda. That takes a kind of courage most people will never touch." I felt my eyes sting. She continued, "If he's reaching out now after seeing your pain that vulnerable, it's because he's responding to exactly who you are. Not a filtered version. Not a smaller version. You. I let that sink in. It still felt fragile, but less impossible. Saturday came. As I stood in front of the closet, my fingers hovered over the teal dress. It had become a kind of armor for me, but I didn't want to hide in it either. I wanted to choose it. So I did. I slipped it on, smoothed the fabric over my hips, and looked in the mirror. My heart was racing, but my eyes were steady. You're allowed to be seen, I whispered to my reflection. Bluebird Coffee was busy when I walked in. A soft roar of conversation filled the space. The bell over the door chimed, and the familiar smell of espresso wrapped around me. I saw him almost immediately. He was sitting at a small table near the window, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. His hair was grayer now, his face a little fuller, but those gentle eyes were the same. When he looked up and saw me, he stood quickly, an almost shy smile spreading across his face. Linda, he said, like he was relieved I was real. Hi, Mark, I replied. He stepped forward like he might hug me, then seemed unsure and stopped himself. For a moment, we both laughed quietly at the awkwardness. It broke the tension in a way that felt easy. You look, he paused, not searching for a polite word but for the right one. You look beautiful. The word didn't sting this time. It landed and stayed. Thank you, I said, my voice soft. We ordered our drinks and sat down. For the first few minutes, we talked about safe things, the school, how the district had changed, mutual acquaintances. But the deeper reason for the meeting sat between us, patient and insistent. He took a breath, his eyes warm. I hope this doesn't sound strange, but when I read your post, I felt angry. Not at you. At them. At how small they tried to make you feel. My stomach tightened, but in a different way than before. I let them, I admitted. For a long time. You trusted them, he corrected. That's not the same thing. I looked down at my hands cupped around the mug. When you've been told since childhood that the size of your body makes you less, you start believing you're lucky to be included at all. Even on the edges. Even as a joke. He nodded slowly. I know it's not the same, but my ex-wife used to pick at me constantly. My job, my hairline, my weight once I hit 40. I started shrinking, not physically but inside, trying to make myself more acceptable. It never worked. It just made me disappear. I looked up, startled. I hadn't thought of him as someone who knew anything about shrinking. What changed? I asked. He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. She left anyway, he said simply. For someone who looked better on paper, I guess. Someone who fit the picture she wanted to post. At first I thought, of course she did. I wasn't enough. Then slowly, I realized I'd spent years auditioning for a life that never saw me. I promised myself I'd never do that again. I'd rather be alone than be an accessory. A strange warmth spread through my chest. I understood that more than I could say. He watched me for a moment, then said, the kids at that school loved you, you know. When they talked about the grown-ups they trusted, your name always came up. I swallowed. I was good with them, I said. It was easy with them. If they were sad, they cried. If they were hurt, they told you. Adults are messy, eh? He laughed softly. That's true. We talked for over an hour. The conversation moved slowly from surface-level memories to deeper waters. His divorce, my retirement, the loneliness that seemed to curl up in the corners of our houses when the sun went down. At one point, he looked at me thoughtfully and said, Can I ask you something a little personal? My heart sped up. Maybe, I said. Has anyone ever told you, he said carefully, that they were attracted to you, exactly as you are? Not as a project. Not as a before picture. As you. My first instinct was to laugh it off. To make a joke. To deflect. Instead, I told the truth. No, I said quietly. Not really. If they did, I never believed them. His gaze held steady. Well, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I'm telling you now. And I mean it. I didn't know what to do with that. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, not from romance or sudden infatuation, but from something deeper, shock, grief, gratitude, all tangled together. Grief for all the years I'd gone without hearing those words. Gratitude that I was hearing them now, from someone who looked at me like I wasn't something to be endured or managed. Thank you, I whispered. You don't know what that does to me. He smiled. I have a guess. When we parted, he didn't pressure me. He didn't ask for anything beyond what I was ready to give. I'd like to see you again, he said as we stood outside the cafe, breath turning to mist in the cold air. As friends. Or more, if that ever felt right to you. No rush. No expectations. The old version of me would have run from that. The current version was terrified too. But she also knew something new. I'd like that, I said. Seeing you again. His smile reached his eyes. Then we'll do that. We said goodbye, and I watched him walk to his car, his shoulders relaxed, his steps steady. I turned back toward home feeling like I'd stepped out of my life for a moment, and into a version of it I hadn't dared imagine. On the way back, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the body shame support group woman who had messaged me earlier in the week. We're having a meeting Thursday night at the community center on 5th. No pressure, but you're welcome. We'd love to hear from you. A lot of women read your post and felt less alone. I stared at the screen. The idea of standing in front of strangers and talking about my shame felt like being asked to step into a spotlight naked. But at the same time, something in me was curious. What if my pain could be used for something other than swallowing me whole? Thursday came faster than I expected. I almost canceled 3 times. I told myself I was too tired, that it was too cold out, that no one would really care if I didn't show up. But then I remembered something Caroline had said. Every time you choose yourself, even in small ways, you are building a new pattern. So I went. The community center was warm and slightly cramped, with old linoleum floors and bulletin boards full of flyers for yoga classes, knitting circles, and literacy programs. The room for the meeting was small, with folding chairs arranged in a loose circle. There were maybe a dozen women there. Different ages, different bodies, different stories, all wearing the same kind of cautious hope on their faces. The leader, a woman in her 40s named Sasha, smiled when she saw me. "You made it," she said. "I'm really glad." We went around the circle sharing names and one sentence about why we were there. When it was my turn, my heart thudded painfully. "I'm Linda," I said. "I made a post about being excluded from my grandchild's baby shower because of my weight. And it went farther than I intended. I'm here because I don't want my story to end with me just being sad about it. I want to figure out how to live after it." There were nods around the circle. One woman dabbed at her eyes. Another whispered, "That was you." I nodded, cheeks burning. As the meeting went on, women shared things I had never heard spoken out loud in a group before. A woman in her 30s talked about her mother putting her on diets at 9 years old. A woman in her 60s cried as she described her husband hiding her from family photos. A single mother talked about being told by a doctor, "We'll talk about your health when you show you respect yourself enough to lose weight." Every story was like a mirror held up to a different angle of the same wound. When it was my turn again, I talked more. I talked about Emily's message, about the word fat weaponized in a sentence that took my breath away. I talked about Daniel's silence, how it hurt more deeply than the insult itself. I talked about shrinking, about standing in the back of photos, about cropping my own body out of memories before anyone else had the chance. I cried. I didn't apologize for it. After the meeting, several women came up to me. "Thank you," one said, squeezing my hand. "You said things I've been too afraid to say." "My daughter showed me your post," another whispered. "She's 17. She looked at me and said, 'Mom, this is why I don't want to go to family parties. You gave us a way to talk about it.'" I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not the quiet, everyday purpose of showing up to work or making dinner. A deeper purpose. The feeling that my life, my body, my story could mean something, not just to me, but to people I didn't even know. The next few weeks unfolded like a slow thaw. There were still hard days. Days when I woke up and felt heavy with grief for the relationship I wished I had with my son. Days when I saw a new picture of Emily online and my stomach twisted with resentment. Days when I looked at my own reflection and old voices tried to drag me back under. But there were also new things. More sessions with Caroline. More support group meetings. More messages from women who had seen my post. And coffee with Mark. We met 3 more times. Each time, the conversation grew easier, deeper. We talked about our favorite books, the music we loved in high school, the foods we ate when no one was watching. He told me about his daughter, who lived in Chicago and worked as a nurse. I told him about Daniel as a child, about the way he used to fall asleep in the back seat, clutching a toy car. We didn't define anything. We didn't rush. We just let it be what it was. Something gentle. Something alive. At the end of one coffee, as we stood in the parking lot, he looked at me with that steady, kind gaze and said, "You know, I'm really glad you didn't stay quiet." I smiled faintly. "Me too. Most days. There are going to be people who resent you for it," he said. "But there are also people who needed you to say it so they could believe they're allowed to say it too." His words sank in like warm tea. I didn't know then how true they would turn out to be. Because one afternoon, about 2 months after the baby shower, I received an email from a local journalist. She wrote for the Columbus Dispatch. She'd seen my post. It had been shared in a private group she was part of. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to talk about it for an article on family, body image, and exclusion. As I read her message, my heart hammered in my chest. Part of me wanted to say no, to retreat back into the small circle of my own healing and keep the rest of the world shut out. But another part remembered the women in that community center room. The way they cried. The way they whispered, "Me too." I thought about my grandchild, who would one day grow up in this same world, absorbing its messages about bodies and worth and visibility. What kind of story did I want them to hear about their grandmother? The woman who stayed quiet? Or the woman who decided she was done being erased? I sat at the kitchen table, fingers hovering over the keys, and made a choice. "Yes," I wrote. "I'm willing to talk." My hands shook as I hit send. I had no idea that a simple local article would lead to something bigger. that a headline and a photo would travel farther than I'd ever been, that my soft, aging face and my round body would appear next to a quote I never imagined myself saying out loud. I had no idea yet, but I was about to find out. And for the first time, instead of dreading being seen, I felt something else entirely. The interview happened on a Thursday morning in early April, the kind of morning where the air still bit with leftover winter, but the sunlight hinted at something gentler coming. I wore the teal dress again, not out of sentimentality, but because it had started to feel like a truer skin, a quiet reminder of the day I first allowed myself to be seen. The journalist, a woman named Erin Carlson, met me at the same cafe where I had met Mark. She was in her 30s, with short hair tucked behind her ears and a notebook already open on the table. She smiled when she saw me walk in and stood immediately to shake my hand. "Linda," she said warmly, "thank you so much for being willing to do this." I wasn't used to being thanked for telling my story. Most of my life, the message had been the opposite. Keep it quiet, don't make people uncomfortable, pretend nothing is wrong. We ordered drinks, and once we sat, she leaned forward. "I want you to know," she said, "you're not the first woman I've interviewed about family exclusion tied to body size. But you're the first who agreed to use her real name." I blinked. "Why?" Her eyes softened. "Because most women are afraid. Not of telling the truth, but of the retaliation. Of being called dramatic, bitter, attention-seeking. Of being shamed all over again." Yes, that fear was familiar. She clicked her pen. "I want to start wherever you're most comfortable." I nodded slowly. I guessed the text message. And so I told her. Everything. The message sent by accident. The words "fat mom" like a bruise pressed directly onto my heart. Daniel's defensiveness. The wedding photos I'd never realized were orchestrated around keeping me out of the frame. The years of shrinking, apologizing, enduring. At one point, my voice cracked, and she paused her writing. "It's okay," she said gently. "Take your time." No one had ever given me time to fall apart before. I wiped my eyes. "It wasn't just the baby shower," I whispered. "It was the confirmation that I had spent years being tolerated, not loved." She wrote that down. I wasn't sure how I felt about it going on record, but it was true. Then she asked, "What changed? What made you speak up publicly after staying quiet so long?" I didn't need to think. "I got tired," I said. Tired of folding myself into a version of womanhood that hurt to live in. Tired of buying clothes that were meant to hide me. Tired of apologizing before anyone even said anything. Tired of people thinking that being fat meant I should be grateful for any scraps of kindness. She didn't write this time, she just listened. "And then," I said, "I found out my son knew. Not just about the shower. About the wedding. About the years she's been embarrassed of me. And I realized if I didn't speak for myself, no one ever would." We talked for over an hour. When it was over, she touched my hand lightly. "You're brave," she said. I shook my head. "I'm scared." "Brave," she repeated, "is what scared looks like when it decides to move anyway." I wasn't sure if she got that quote from a book or made it up on the spot, but it stayed with me long after I left. 2 weeks later, the article was published. I didn't recognize myself at first. The headline read, "Mother excluded from grandchild's baby shower speaks out. I won't be invisible anymore." Below it was a photo of me sitting by the cafe window, hands folded, light catching the silver streak in my hair. I looked soft, tired, strong in a way that didn't require tightening fists. The article was thorough, empathetic, and painfully honest. Erin wrote about generational shame, fat phobia in families, the emotional cost of being treated as an aesthetic problem instead of a person. She quoted my exact words. Words I never thought I'd see printed anywhere. People shared it. Locally at first. Then farther. Facebook groups. Instagram stories. Twitter threads. Women I didn't know tagged their sisters, their mothers, their friends who had been told to lose weight before Christmas photos, or excluded from bridesmaid duties, or handed diet books as birthday gifts. Within days, my inbox was full. Not of cruelty. Of confessions. I thought I was the only one. My daughter stopped talking to me because I gained weight. My husband hasn't touched me in years, but he says it's my fault for getting bigger. My sister untagged me from her wedding photos. Dozens. Then hundreds. Pain was everywhere. I just hadn't known how many people were forced to bury it in silence. One message, though, undid me completely. It was from a young woman named Ava. She wrote, "I showed your article to my mom. We haven't talked in 6 months because I told her I was tired of her making comments about my weight. She always said she didn't mean to hurt me. She called me tonight and apologized for the first time in my life. Thank you." I pressed a hand to my mouth and cried. Not out of sadness this time. Out of awe. One truth spoken openly had loosened something in other people. My voice, this voice that had been quiet for 58 years, was echoing in places I'd never seen. There were darker things too. Emily saw the article. Of course she did. It was naive to think she wouldn't. I found out when Daniel called, his voice sharp with stress. "Mom," he said before I could speak. She's furious. She says you humiliated her in front of everyone. I swallowed. I didn't use her name. You didn't have to. People know. Her family knows. Her coworkers know. And what about me? I whispered. Do you think I wasn't humiliated? Do you think my pain is less important because I wrote it down? He groaned. Can you please just apologize to her so we can move on? She's pregnant, Mom. She doesn't need this stress. My stomach twisted painfully. In all of this, I said softly, you still haven't asked if I'm okay. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, Mom, you're making it bigger than it is. I felt something inside me harden, like clay exposed to heat. No, I said. I'm finally making it as big as it actually is. He exhaled, frustrated. If you don't apologize, she says she doesn't want you meeting the baby when she's born. It was a threat. A cruel one. But it wasn't entirely unexpected. My heart skipped, then steadied. Daniel, I said, do you hear what you're saying? Do you hear what she is saying? You're telling your mother she won't meet her grandchild unless she apologizes for being hurt. He hesitated. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. His voice softened, pleading. Please, just think about it. I closed my eyes. For decades, I had done everything to keep the peace. This time, my silence would not be peace. It would be self-betrayal. I won't apologize, I said quietly. Not for telling the truth. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, I have to go. When the call ended, I sat very still. The silence in my house was different now. Not empty. Not frightening. Strong. But grief seeped into the edges of that strength. I thought of my unborn grandchild, the tiny heartbeat on a screen I had not been invited to see. I thought of the possibility that I might miss years of their life because I refused to bow. I hugged myself tightly and rocked slightly, whispering through tears, You're doing the right thing. You are. I wasn't sure I believed it. But I said it anyway. The next morning, I went to the support group. Sasha saw my face the moment I walked in and opened her arms. I let myself be held. When I finally told them what Daniel had said, the circle erupted, not with pity, but with outrage. That's emotional manipulation, someone said. That's abuse, another murmured. They're using the baby as leverage, Sasha said firmly. And that is never okay. I trembled as I listened. I don't want to lose him, I whispered. You're not losing him, Sasha said. He's losing the version of you who stayed quiet. That's different. The room hummed with agreement. There was power in their validation. Power in not being the only one who saw the cruelty so clearly. When I left that night, the sky was a deep blue-black, stars barely visible behind the city's glow. The air was crisp, and I hugged my coat closer. A text arrived on my phone. Mark, thinking about you tonight. Hope you're being gentle with yourself. I closed my eyes. For the first time in days, something inside me unclenched. I typed back. Thank you. Trying my best. His reply was instant. You deserve better than what they're giving you right now. If you need anything, company, distraction, silence, I'm here. I held the phone to my chest, warmth spreading through me. In the weeks that followed, the article continued to circulate. Podcasts reached out. A local radio host emailed asking if I wanted to speak anonymously. Even a small publishing imprint sent a message about writing a memoir, though I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. But the biggest change wasn't external. It was internal. Because somewhere between the messages from strangers, the therapy sessions, the support group meetings, and the quiet coffees with Mark, I began to feel something shift in how I saw myself. For the first time, I wasn't living my life trying not to be too much. I wasn't apologizing for my body in every room I entered. I wasn't accepting crumbs of affection and calling it love. I wasn't begging to be included. I was choosing. Choosing where I went. Choosing what I wore. Choosing who I allowed near me. Choosing the shape of my days, and the shape of my heart. By early May, I no longer jumped when my phone buzzed. I no longer checked social media compulsively. I no longer waited for Daniel to make the first step toward reconciliation. And then one morning he did. He called. Not to defend Emily. Not to guilt me. Not to argue. But to ask something quietly, almost fearfully. Mom, can I come over? When he arrived, he stood in the doorway looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His voice shook. She told me, he whispered. She told me I had to choose. Between her and you. My breath stopped. He swallowed hard. And I told her I wouldn't choose. Not like that. Tears blurred my vision. Daniel. She left, he said quietly. She took her things and went to stay with her mother. She said she needed time. She said I needed to get my priorities straight. He looked at me with eyes full of fear and grief. I don't know what's going to happen with my marriage, he said. But I realized something. I've been trying so hard to keep her happy that I forgot what it meant to be a good son. I forgot how to stand up for the people who stood up for me. I covered my mouth with my hand. He continued, voice cracking. I don't want my child growing up thinking love is conditional on being thin or perfect. I don't want them learning that their grandmother wasn't worthy. I don't ever want them thinking bodies are problems. He stepped closer. Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. I'm so damn sorry. I began to cry, not the quiet tears of shame, but the loud, trembling sobs of someone finally being seen. He held me as I cried, and for the first time in months, I let him. We stood in the doorway like that for a long time. When I finally pulled back, he wiped his face and gave a shaky laugh. You're stronger than I ever realized, he said. I smiled faintly. I didn't realize it either. He exhaled. Will you help me figure out how to be better? How to be someone you can trust again? Yes, I whispered. But not at the cost of myself. Never again, he said. Something healed between us in that moment. Not fully, not perfectly, but honestly. It was enough. Later that afternoon, after he left, I wrote in my notebook. I am building a life where I am not afraid of being seen. I didn't know exactly what the future would look like. But I knew 3 things with absolute clarity. I would be in my grandchild's life. I would no longer shrink myself for anyone. And I would never again let love be something I earned by disappearing. As I closed the notebook, my phone buzzed again. A message from Mark. Want to take a walk later? The weather's perfect. No expectations. Just 2 people breathing the same air. I smiled. Maybe the world wasn't smaller because I took up space. Maybe it was finally expanding to fit me. And just like that, without fanfare, without a dramatic soundtrack, without a single apology, the woman I had always been quietly waiting to become stepped fully into the room.